Hi, thank you so much for being here today for V²M, the Veteran Magazine, and interviewing with us. Could you tell us your name and what branch of service you were in and how long?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. My name is Jason McCoy. I am an Air Force veteran. I spent 12 years on active duty, and I've been in the reserves for the last 7 years.
What did you do in the Air Force?
So I had quite a few jobs in the Air Force. I'm never one to sit still. So I came into the Air Force as a security forces specialist, kind of military police and all around security work. Did that for 2.5 years, and then got a shred out from that job to be a firearms instructor. So I did that full time for 3 years. And then I became an Air Force OSI special agent, mostly specializing in counterintelligence work. Spent 3 years at a special operations unit doing like reconnaissance work. And then that's where I exited active duty and went back into being a special agent in the reserves.
And what made you join the Air Force, and how old were you when you joined?
Yeah, so when I went to MEPS, I was actually 17 years old, and the Air Force was, I think, the result of some really good advice from some of my dad's coworkers. My dad was in law enforcement for 27 years, and he had a lot of buddies and a lot of coworkers from all the different branches of the military. Obviously, I joined in 2000, or I went to basic training in 2007. So, Afghanistan and Iraq were both very hot and heavy at the time. So all of his coworkers were advising my dad to push me toward the Air Force just because of the quality of life, the job satisfaction there. It's seen as one of the branches with a lot of niceties, and I would say that's true. They take care of their airmen really well. I could have joined any branch. I just wanted to be in the military. I wanted to serve, and I think that there are great jobs to do in every branch. But my dad really said, "Hey, if you want to join right now, I have to sign your enlistment paperwork because you're still a minor. So I'll only sign for the Air Force." And I said, "Let's go."
That's awesome. So tell me about some of the places that you were stationed, or maybe some great memories you have from being in the Air Force.
Yeah, I've got fond memories from everywhere that I was stationed. I think it's partly due to my outlook. Me and my wife were both very optimistic and positive people, and look for the best in things. And we have a lot of gratitude, and try to find gratitude. But started off, I was raised in South Louisiana, and my first duty station was Alamogordo, New Mexico, Holloman Air Force Base. So it is like high desert as it gets. I mean, there's sand and some cactus and tumbleweeds, actual tumbleweeds, and you're surrounded by a ring of mountains, and it's just dry, high desert. So it was quite a culture shock coming from the south, the swamps and pine trees and cypress, and just being out there, and you could actually see, and until the mountains hit, you could see very far. But there wasn't a lot to do there. We joked, we called the shopping mall the Hall because it was a Kmart and a JCPenney, and then like maybe 6 little stores in a hallway connecting the two, and that was the Alamogordo Mall. Not a lot to do, but we started having kids very young. It was a great place to raise a family, and we had some really close connections with friends there because that is what you had was those relationships. From there, I went to Combat Arms School to be a firearms instructor and got orders to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And that's actually where I'm serving right now as a reservist. So every summer I get to go back there for 2 weeks and kind of feel nostalgic and see where my kids ran around when they were 2 and 3 years old. It's pretty wild. Alabama was great for us. I was back home in the South. I was only 5 hours from my parents, and which is definitely doable in a weekend, even with small kids. So we enjoyed our time there. And then when I became a special agent, I got orders to Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, Alaska, and that has to be my favorite assignment. If the wife, she said the winters were just a little bit too long, and granted, sometimes you've got snow on the ground for 8 months out of the year, so that is a lot. But I would still be in Alaska if she enjoyed it as much as I did. And not to say she didn't enjoy it. She got into hiking. She had a really close-knit group of girlfriends there, and really got into the outdoors and just the beauty of that place. But yeah, Alaska was incredible for us. From there, we moved to Pinehurst, North Carolina. I was stationed at Fort Bragg under a specialized unit there, and that was the best job I ever had. You know, it's one of those places where you don't have a question if you're making an impact. You know, you're doing some very sensitive work, but it's also the very tip of the spear. So it was an absolute honor and pleasure to be down there and just that area around Fort Bragg, North Carolina. There's so many legendary people and units and you know, training opportunities and you name it. I mean, if the military is your profession, that's also the tip of the spear. So yeah, I exited active duty. I took a job with the FBI for a few years and joined the reserves, and I'm still serving as a reservist. Like I said, I'm the senior enlisted leader to the OSI detachment at Maxwell Air Force Base, and basically supervise investigators for 2 weeks a year. And sometimes they supervise me, you know, because there's always that stigma of just being you're the weekend warrior, you're the reservist. I think oftentimes they forget that many reservists spent time in active duty and have extensive experience. But there's always the active duty who looks at it like, hey, you know, thanks for being here, but we've got it.
Right.
But I do enjoy it. I get the opportunity to pour into, especially young airmen and young investigators. You know, I never thought I'd say that. I never wanted the responsibility of being a senior NCO, but somehow it found me, and I guess I became that old crusty master sergeant.
So tell me, what are one of maybe a couple life lessons that you've learned by being in the Air Force and even in the reserves, things that you feel like you could take away from your time?
Yeah, life lessons are simple. If you've ever deployed or you ever spent any time in the military and you know, got to travel at all, it's again, I'll go back to gratitude. It's be thankful for what you have. I'm so thankful that I was born in the United States of America, and have the opportunities that I've had growing up. I'd say even the poorest of us here in America have it 10 times better than some of the people in these countries that I've visited. Not just war-torn countries either. You know, I've gone to other countries as part of humanitarian missions, or just traveling through, and you see we really do have it made here. This really is the greatest country on earth, and we should be thankful of that. Yeah, I'd say that's the biggest one. Mm-hmm. The other part is, you know, life and especially service in the military can be an adventure if you embrace it as such. So take advantage of every opportunity you get. You know, always seek out new opportunities and just be grateful that you know, you get to experience this amazing world. Yeah.
So what brought you to Lynchburg, Virginia?
So this was where the FBI sent me. Okay. A lot of people aren't aware, but you know, the FBI has 56 field offices across the country, and usually they're in like major or capital cities. So here in Virginia, we actually have 2 field offices. You've got the Norfolk field office that handles everything on the Virginia Beach side, and then you've got Richmond field office, which handles, I think it's something like 86 counties across Virginia. So the majority of Virginia is handled by the Richmond field office. So underneath that, you've got several what the FBI calls resident agencies. So those are going to be in your smaller cities. So places like Winchester, Charlottesville, Lynchburg, Roanoke, Bristol, and I may be forgetting one. But I was assigned here to the Lynchburg resident agency under the Richmond field office, and spent 6 years here, or almost 6 years here as an FBI special agent.
And now you have an archery, a nonprofit, and it's called Index Archery.
Yeah.
Tell me how do you go from shooting guns to shooting arrows, and what brought that, you know, all about?
Yeah, so archery had always been intriguing to me. Growing up in the South, growing up in the Scouts and 4-H and all that stuff, you know, there's definitely a place for archery in my childhood. But it was when I moved to Alabama and wanted to get back into the Southern style of hunting, you know, deer hunting from a tree stand, and, you know, still hunting is what we call it. I wanted to get into that. I'd grown up doing it, and you know, I've always wanted to be able to provide meat for the table, all that stuff. So not long after we got to Alabama, the wife and I were at a Bass Pro Shops, and I'm looking at rifles, and I want a new hunting rifle. And like I said, we had 3 small children in the home at that point. So my wife was like, well, maybe we don't get any more guns. We had already had a few. maybe we hold off until we get a safe, because we've got tiny fingers and curious toddlers rolling around, and yeah, I know. So right next to the gun counter were the bows, and I started looking. I'm like, well, maybe a compound bow would work. My grandpa shot a compound bow, and all of the hunting TV shows right now, like the archery was the big thing. So I'm just looking at them. So we leave, and a couple days later, this was probably in November. A couple weeks later, I come home from work one day, and I'm teaching firearms. And it's December now, and we've got our Christmas tree set up. And I walk into the front door, and sure enough, there's this obviously bow-shaped wrapped present for me under the tree. So my wife got me my first compound bow. So I started hunting, took it with me to Alaska. I hunted a few critters in Alaska with it. And then in 2015, I deployed to Afghanistan for the third time. And that's where, 6 of my teammates were killed during that deployment from a motorcycle IED. And, that really messed with me. Not just, losing my teammates and experiencing that and the aftermath of that, but it was also the person that I became during that time frame. I've always seen myself as a protector. In my first job in the Air Force, some people call us cops, but we call ourselves defenders. And that's really your role, is to, you're protecting the airmen and the Americans, who are on that base. So, growing up, yeah, sure, I romanticized war, but as a man, I never wanted to, you hope you never had to kill anyone. But then 6 of my teammates are gone, and there's this terrorist cell that's responsible for that attack, that had planned that attack, and vengeance takes over, and it became our mission to, essentially deal with every single one of anyone who had any hand in what happened to my teammates. So it was that wrath and that vengeance that kind of took over me and made me a person that I wasn't necessarily proud of when I got home. So I dealt with that. I dealt with survivor's guilt, all these things, depression. I'm sure you guys have heard all this before from people with similar stories, but I didn't deal with it in the best way. I turned to alcohol. I turned to, I'd stay up all night drinking. I'd sleep all day, and then I before the wife and kids came home from school, my wife's a teacher, by the way, so before they'd come home from school, I'd run in the kitchen and I'd throw some ketchup on a plate and throw it in the sink and make it look like I'd been up and busy throughout the day, but I'd just gotten up an hour ago. Yeah, a lot of isolation. I didn't want to talk about it. It's just everyone asked, "Hey, how are you doing?" Because it was no secret what happened on that deployment. And I'm fine. And I could laugh with the best of them. I'd hide it really well. But it was one day. I think it may have been some divine intervention. But one day my bow was sitting in my garage, and I had zero interest in doing anything that typically interested me. But for some reason, I grabbed the bow and I went out to the archery range, which is like on base, less than a mile from my house. I could walk there. And I pulled out my bow and I was like, I guess I'll shoot this thing. And I shot one time, and it was a really, really bad shot. And again, here I am, the firearms instructor, the archery guy, the marksman, and it's, so that kind of, whoa, what was that? And I knock another arrow, and now I'm focused, and I shoot, and I hit a bullseye. And I did that for about 2 hours. And then in hindsight, I realized, I don't know if it was that night, the next day, whatever, but I realized that 2 hours was the first time in like 8 months that I hadn't thought about December 21st, 2015, that it hadn't been on my mind. I realized I was walking around with these blinders, and even when I was trying to be present with the family or in the world or at work or whatever, December 21st was just sitting right here. And when I shot the bow, I was able to take those blinders off for at least 2 hours. So I said, there's something to that. I need to lean into this. Because as much as I didn't want to admit it, the military, especially the Air Force, they're very good at cramming what we think of as these stupid trainings down your throat. Resiliency training and suicide awareness training and PTSD training. You're just like, I got to do all these trainings every year, and this is so boring. But when you go through trauma and you experience something, suddenly that training starts popping up, and you're like, hey, you know exactly what's going on because you've been sitting through trainings for the last 8-9 years. So I knew I just had to have the courage to be real with myself. So eventually the bow kind of exposed all that. I said, if this is working for me, if this is helping me, then obviously there's a problem. So eventually I walked into the base mental health clinic and had my first appointment with, a psych doc. And I thought all of the negative stigmas that are attached to that. Oh, you're going to lose your top secret clearance, and you're not going to be able to carry a gun anymore, and they're going to kick you out. They're going to lock you in a padded room for a week and send you to this hospital. And none of that happened. I went to a doctor's appointment. I sat down. I talked to a therapist. She recommended some things, and I left. And she said, call us when you're ready for your next appointment. And then a couple weeks later, I made another one and another one. And before you knew it, I was seeing a counselor. And it's because, of the bow. And I wasn't ready for talk therapy, but I could listen to her and I could take some of those things. And again, while I was shooting my bow and quieting the world, I could maybe meditate and focus on some of the recommendations that doctor gave, or just think about that session or whatever. So it became my medicine. So in 2019, when I left active duty, me and my co-founder, Ray, he's a retired Air Force special agent, and archery was doing a lot for him as well. So we decided to just start mentoring people. And after we got 12 or so people into archery and watched them spend their own money on all of the equipment, we were like, I can't do this anymore. This is breaking my heart, And it's like, I don't think the people mind it, but it's a sticker shock, It's like, hey, here's this great tool, and I love archery so much, and they're like, they get all excited about it. Then it's like, oh man, I got to spend, $7, $8, $9, $2,000 on all of this stuff. So in 2022, we founded Index as a 501c3 to be able to raise money and accept donations, to be able to provide 100% of the equipment that someone would need to start using archery as therapy.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, incredible. How many people or veterans have gone through your nonprofit since you started?
Yeah, so I actually need to sit down and do another count, because I think we're at 10 for this year so far. So if so, that puts us at around 102. Wow. So last year was a very big year for us, and this year is going to be as well. So in the next 3 to 4 years, how do I go from serving 40 heroes a year to 400 heroes a year? And then how do I turn that into our nationwide impact, and we go from 400 to 4,000 a year? I think those are the numbers that we'd like to hit.
Sure, yeah.
So we've got big plans.
That's awesome. Do you have some personal stories of people who've gone through your program or gone through with the archery, and they've seen that impact also in their life?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one, I would call him a close friend now, but he started off as this young former Marine. And I'll risk saying too much to say that this, at one point he disclosed to me, hey, I just put a pistol in my mouth for the 3rd time. And we're on the phone, and I had to say, like, hey, stop, don't do that anymore. Like, that's not a thing you do anymore. But through not just our program, I'll give him credit and say that he was also trying to do his own thing with getting people outdoors. But through our program and through the community that we've kind of curated around Index and some of our partners, this guy's life has totally changed, completely changed, to the point that he's now living in another state, working his dream job, and in the archery industry, and gives us a lot of credit for that. But I'll say in general, the changes that we've seen happening is, yes, the archery is therapeutic. Yes, the bow is helping them. But it's that community aspect. When I can take someone who has way too much time on their hands, way too much time to sit around and think, especially think negatively, and that's what they do. And I can now put a bow in their hands, and they can spend 20 minutes a day or a week or whatever getting out of their own head. But then on the weekend, they get together with a group of guys. And it starts to feel like they're serving again, because you make a decent shot on a target and someone's like, not good enough, you suck. Now everyone's laughing again, and it's that camaraderie that people miss. But that's the most positive feedback that I've gotten from multiple heroes that have gone through our program is because of the community, and because now they have this group of people in their lives that their life has completely changed, and they have a whole new outlook. There's recommendations that we give, there's therapies that we do that we've developed through archery. One of those is, I stole from an art therapy session that I had to go through. But you can take an arrow, and when you're building arrows, you can put different colors on them. You can put these fancy vinyl wraps around the end of the arrow where you put your fletchings, and you can kind of personalize that. So why not have someone go through kind of an art therapy session and put some intention behind the colors used on that arrow? and think about whatever's bothering them. It doesn't have to be, the absolute source of their trauma. For today, it could just be, hey, property taxes are due and I don't know if I can cover it or whatever, whatever's stressing you out. But channel that negative energy into that arrow. Sit down, meditate with it for a second, just hold that arrow and think of whatever negative stuff you've got going on, just coating that arrow in like a slime. But then you go off and you shoot it either into a target, or better yet, there's these steel targets that exist in the archery world, and what's going to happen if you shoot an arrow at a steel target? It's going to blow up. And that's the whole thing with art therapy, is you create something, then you destroy it and kind of release that negative energy. So we can do that with an arrow.
Wow.
I can have you, shoot it into a pond and it's gone forever. And there is a release there. So, that stuff, I think it's a combination of all the things that helps, but really what we're capturing is the community. That's
awesome. That's incredible what you're doing for veterans. They don't have to know how to shoot a bow and arrow before they come to you.
Correct.
You can start them out from the very beginning.
That's the biggest thing, is we look for people who've never shot a bow before, or who have very, very little experience, because most people are exposed at some point in their life, whether it's through school or clubs, or a brother or something like that had a bow and you shot his a couple times. But we look for people who are not involved in archery and who've never used it as therapy and who currently don't own a bow. Our whole thing is we're introducing this to you. Now we'll work with people. If someone already shoots a bow, but they're not looking at it for the therapeutic aspects, they can still come into our program and we'll work with them. We're just not going to give them brand new equipment, because we can save that for someone who doesn't have it. But yeah, everyone starts off, at least everyone here in Virginia, and I have ambassadors in multiple states, and I kind of give them the freedom to run their program the way it needs to be run for their community. But for here in Central Virginia, everyone comes to my bow shop that's in my garage, and we start with about a 3-hour session, and it goes from sometimes they've never held a bow before, to the end of that session, they're shooting a target at 20 yards, and they're ready to go home and either shoot safely on their own property, or they've identified some place that they can practice.
So you said you have places other than Virginia. What other states do you have that, and how many?
So we are in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Texas, Utah, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia. I think that's it.
Wow.
But we're growing every day. And there's actually some more that are coming on. I think we're bringing on in Indiana and in Illinois. So that'll be 10 very soon.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Again. So tell me, we've got veterans, we've got active duty people that are starting, active duty soldiers who are coming in and they're retiring, they're stepping out, or they're coming in. What kind of advice would you give to someone who was going into the service, and then how about someone who's stepping out and retiring?
Yeah, I guess I'll say it's a two-part thing. Don't let your service define you. Don't let that be the best part of your life and the best part of who you are, right? I think service is incredible, and I'm honored to meet and serve with all of these wonderful human beings. But our service in the military is temporary, and sometimes it encapsulates people's whole identity, and it shouldn't. We should use our service to grow ourselves, to train ourselves, and make us ready for the next thing. And that's the second part of this, is your service doesn't have to stop when you get your DD-214. I have one of our ambassadors never served in the military, was never a first responder, a civil servant, public servant, whatever. And initially when he started helping us out, and I chose him because of his ability to relate with people, his ability to share the gospel with people. That's also a component of what my life is. But he had a lot of insecurities because he never served. And I said, Mark, serve right now. If we're taking care of veterans and service members and public servants and first responders, and then you're serving your community by making this community healthier and better for them. So that's my challenge to anyone who serves is don't let that DD-214 be the end of your service. Find a way to give back, and it doesn't have to be through a veteran organization, because you can be a volunteer firefighter. There's so many ways to make an impact on our local communities, on our national community, on our world, to make this a better place. All of that is service.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a different world than it was when you joined in the service. What advice would you give to someone who's 17, who's stepping into the military in this environment and world and the way that things are at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, currently, we're at war, and I'd say we have been at war for the last 25, 26 years, except for a little, maybe short period, but even then there were conflicts, right? So if you're coming into the military under the impression that you're not going to deploy or something like that, I'd say that you have an uninformed opinion, and that takes some reflection, right? Joining the military should not be taken lightly. It's a very real responsibility. It's a very adult decision to make. And lots of people have motivations for joining the military, and it's, I want to get money for school, or I want to learn a trade or something like that. But at the end of the day, what your nation is asking you to do is, potentially go to war. And I say, if you find yourself in that situation, look to the person to your left and your right and make that your responsibility. Protect the person to your left and your right. Fight for the person to your left and your right. Whether you believe in the cause or not, whether it's politics, whatever it is, don't get wrapped up in that. It's about the person to your left and your right. Fight for them, work with them. Everyone works together and make it home. But at the end of the day, just know that sacrifices are made in the military every single day, and it is for a very grateful nation, and it is for a reason. There's the freedoms that we enjoy are paid for by our men and women in service.
Yes.
So it's very important, and it's a very honorable thing.
Absolutely. I would be wrong to not mention that what you're doing here at CloudFit and how you got to be a part of that. Tell me what they're doing with people in the community and how you got to be a part of that as well.
Yeah, so CloudFit, it's an incredible company. It's a software company here in Lynchburg. Our CEO is actually from the Gladys, Alta Vista area, and worked for Microsoft for over 20 years, and decided he wanted a tech company here in Lynchburg. But the company was actually founded to support two nonprofits. One of those nonprofits is called KidFit, and they provide high-level athletic training for kids, and they never ask for payment. They'll take donations, but the whole point of it is they want to level the playing field. Not everyone has the money for private trainers and travel teams and all this stuff, but that's where KidFit comes into play, and they bring in some really impressive coaches and athletes, and in some cases will even pay tuition. If someone does have the skill to make it onto a travel team and money is that barrier for them to be able to unlock the next level, KidFit will pay for that. So it's a really incredible nonprofit. The other one is called JobFit, and it is about paid internships and chances for career changes. One of the problems you have in the tech industry, if you look at any job listing, even for an entry-level job listing in the tech field, you need experience. Right. And it's like, well, how do I get experience if I can't get a job to get experience? Right. And so a lot of people in the past have had to, work their way through internships, unpaid internships, and really fight to get the experience necessary to get into the tech field. Well, what JobFit does is they offer those paid internships, those paid opportunities, but then for career changers like myself, they recognize there's value in our backgrounds, and we have skill sets, and those skill sets can translate to the tech field. They just need to make the link. So for someone like me, they give me a chance. I have zero experience in tech. I have a lot of experience in other things. So they bring me over, and they've been teaching me on the job the skills that I need to be effective here. And I work with a lot of really incredible people here, so I would say that it's the formula they've worked out. They nailed it, because it's a great company with great people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just want to thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
It's an honor.
And thank you for creating something that is leaving lives changed and a legacy for them to continue and what you're doing and growing. We just so appreciate that, what you're doing for our heroes.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.